After several years in communication and media sectors, Nathalie Joffre moved to London to study photography at the London College of Communication. Since then, she has received several awards, both in France and abroad. She's very, very young. She has lots of awards. The Sproxton Award for Photography, 2012 in London, le Prix Icare, 2013 in Paris, Shortlist Celeste Prize, 2013, Shortlist Aesthetica Art Prize, 2012. She is recipient of several scholarships and residencies, DRAC, Fondation Katia and Marielle, 2014, au 104. The Nathalie Joffre's works has been featured in many exhibitions and festivals in France and abroad. In particular, in 2016, she was invited to take part in the collective exhibitions titled The Materiality of the Invisible at the 104 in Paris. Nathalie works a lot on memory, and the path and her work with you all was about it. There is a quote from The Poetic of Space from Gaston Bachelard that she likes. I will quote it. "We are never real historians, but always near poets, and our emotion is perhaps nothing but an expression of a poetry that was lost." And of course, it's very important for us to understand the role of the heart in our life, in our society all the time. And I would like to welcome very, very warmly Nathalie Joffre, please.
Bonjour à tous, merci pour cette invitation à Xavier. I'm going to switch into English et je vais vous expliquer un petit peu le projet que... alors, je ne sais pas... le projet que je vais essayer de réaliser avec vous au cours de cette semaine, que j'ai intitulé The Yearbook Project. So, last week I visited a very interesting exhibition in New York called The Keepers at the New Museum. And this exhibition is very interesting because it's dedicated to the act of preserving objects, artworks, and images. And on this image, you can see the centerpiece of this exhibition, which is called the Teddy Bear Project by an artist called Idessa Andeles. This installation is composed of 3,000 family album photographs of people posing with teddy bears, which is very unusual as an art piece. And you can also find real teddy bears in this exhibition. So, for example, here is an image which you can find in the exhibition. I would like you to look at this image because I think it's a really interesting image. You have a soldier or an aviator, I don't really know, who is holding a teddy bear. And I think that if you look at this image, you will see that if this person wasn't holding a teddy bear, he would look like very different. I think we look at him very differently with this teddy bear. I think it raises questions about his childhood, about his identity, about his personality, and about his individual history. It makes him more special to our eyes. So this is another example which I really like. And another picture that is part of the installation. Now, if you look at this image, it's a child posing with his teddy bear. And it's also interesting because the teddy bear is a perfect example of the child's object of affection. I think all of us, we had a teddy bear in our childhood, I think. I had one. And usually children have a teddy bear at an age when they are starting to be independent and that at an age when they are starting to build their personality, their identity. So I chose this project, I wanted to show you this project because I think it symbolizes perfectly how simple objects, such as teddy bears, can be meaningful to us and are essential pieces of our identity, from childhood to our death. So now, if we come back to this idea of childhood, I would like to give you a little bit of background. Maybe it's going to be a bit abstract, but I think it's important to give you this background. So between the 4th and 18th month, I'm not sure you remember this age, baby starts developing an intermediate area of human experience between what they are in the inside, their inner reality, and the outside world. So the area was described by a psychoanalyst called Winnicott in 1951 as the transitional space. And the best example of that is the creation of an object, which is called the transitional object. And the best example of this transitional object can be a teddy bear, it can be a blanket, it can be a toy, anything like that. And by cuddling objects like this, children feel that they are cuddling the mother and they feel comforted. And it's their first bridge between the inner and the outer world. So in that sense, the invention of this object, the teddy bear, for example, by the child, is perhaps our first truly act of creation. Because we use our imagination for the first time to create reality out of nothing. So I just want to give you this quote, and then I'm finished with the abstract background from Winnicott. So it is in the space between inner and outer world that intimate relationship and creativity occur. So for me, this concept of transitional object was a very important concept when I thought about what I was going to do with you during this residency and during this week. So as we just saw, objects can be central in the construction of our personal identity. Through them, we start our relationship with the outside world, and we develop our creativity for the first time. Today, if we look at the context and at our experience, we live in a society where people are more and more interested in living experiences than possessing objects. But still, if you look at people, they always feel the need to keep, to collect, to archive objects. And I'm not talking about consumer goods or precious things. I'm talking about very special objects, the most personal and intimate that stay with us as a part of our identity and a part of our memory. So finding, keeping, collecting these objects can be one of the most personal acts of creation of our life. And even if they are broken, cheap, ugly, very small, uninteresting for most of the other people, this object means a lot to us. So now, if I come back to my practice as an artist, objects from the past has always been central in my artistic practice from the very beginning. So one of my very, very early work was called La robe de chambre. So in English, I think it's the dressing gown. And it is a series of 10 black and white analog photographs of a dressing gown from my childhood, which is not really beautiful, so you can see it here. And the story is I have kept this garment with me for years, even if it was too small. To be honest, I don't know why. I didn't know why. So I became obsessed by it, wondering where it was coming from. I didn't remember. I couldn't remember. But the only thing I could remember was the fact that somebody has given it to me. So I started photographing this dressing gown in different positions and locations in my family garden during a few months. And it was really an intuitive process for me. So this process was, for me, a way to look at this object, to observe it, to study it, finally to stage it in my present, and it was also a process to remember my childhood. So objects from my past, so garments, postcards, old photographs, pieces of wood, plates, hats, dresses, are still very important in my artistic practice today. I stage them, I photograph them, I film them, I invent stories about them, and I study them. But firstly, what I do is I archive them, sorry. So during this week, I'm kind of going to use the same process. I think you can consider me as an archivist of your own objects. My idea is to build an archive of your objects. And for me, that's why I call this project the yearbook project. You can see it as a new kind of yearbook, but a yearbook where there wouldn't be any faces and there wouldn't be any names. They would be just objects. So how I will proceed, I think that most of you have already written some short description about these objects. So today and tomorrow, I will be in the studio, and my plan is to photograph these objects, so don't be shy and don't worry, I won't touch the object. If you don't want me to touch, I will be very careful with your object, because I know they are very important for you. We can discuss, and if at the end you don't want to have it in the photograph, don't worry, I will say that's not a problem. So everything will remain anonymous, so please don't be afraid. And believe me, I think you're going to learn a lot through this subject. So thank you.
Thank you, Nathalie.
When I was very young, at 11, I had an idol, like most of us. Here he is. I'm not sure you know him. His name is Howard Carter. Thank you. His name is Howard Carter. So he's one of the most famous archaeologists in history. He was a British archaeologist who discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922. So for Christmas, my parents used to buy me books around archaeology. I myself used to dig in my garden. I had planned to dig an engraved stone in the garden in order to leave it for future generations. And one day, I found a bone in the garden. And when I gave it to my parents, I was very disappointed because they told me it was the dog's bones. Anyway, I grew up surrounded by archaeology, surrounded by old houses, caves, church, mysterious woods. But for many reasons, for various reasons, I did not become an archaeologist, at least in the traditional sense. But in a way, and now in my artistic work, and with the work I've done with you this week, I've never stopped exploring the past. So a few years later, I ended far, far away from my caves and my woods, and I ended up here in Cergy-Pontoise at ESSEC. But still, I was very interested in art. I was writing poetry every day. And to be honest, during my studies, one of my most important discoveries and endless source of inspiration was the Surrealist Movement. So I'm not sure, I don't know if you're familiar with this movement, but for me, it was a pure creative discovery, a discovery of pure freedom, pure creative freedom. And it gave me courage to be an artist. And it was, to some, it was really a revolution in my head. So I then studied surrealism in a more academic way at the University La Sorbonne, but I used the eyes of the art historian. So after my MA thesis, I realized I felt not really at my place using the vocabulary of the art historian. I have never acknowledged that my language was the language of the artist. So from that day, I started experimenting. So I show you on Wednesday a few examples of my early works. So I start practicing photography every day. I start experimenting, but I was a bit hidden, so I was not used to show it to people. It was my secret in a way. Taking black and white analog photographs of things, especially things from the past, rooms, old clothes, old walls in the street. And for me, photography was a physical and empirical act of poetry towards the world. So it was not about looking at the decisive moments, but wandering in familiar spaces to find traces and wounds of the past. Very quickly, movements started to appear in my photography. So here you have an example of a work from 2005, which I almost never shown to anybody. So you're very lucky. So it's just to show you that the work of any work is always evolving, and sometimes you don't really, you are not really conscious about it. So movements started appearing in my work, and a few months after, I realized I wanted to make videos. So I started making films, making video by myself, progressively. And through film and video, I wanted to visually explore what was happening to me while I was creating, the mistakes, the changes, the imaginative work, how temporalities were bumping into each other, present, past, future, and how non-linear, subjective, populated by bugs and unexpected dreams, the exploration of the past can be. So there is a quote, I'm sorry it's in French, and I'm going to try to translate it in English. So in French, it's indépendamment de ce qui arrive, de ce qui n'arrive pas, c'est l'attente qui est magnifique. So in English, I'm sorry for André Bautron. Independently for what happens or does not happen, it is the expectation that is the most beautiful. So I think this is very important in the artistic process in general. This is very important in life in general, and for me, it's at the center of my practice. So the process is very, very important. So in 2012, I moved to London because I realized I wanted to be a professional artist, and I began studying photography at the London College of Communication. So during that period, I started looking at old photographs and photographic archives. So I became more and more interested in early photography from the 19th century, and especially in the link between photography and psychiatry. Donc, through my research, I discovered a collection of old photographs. You can see an example here. Conserved at an hospital called Bethlehem Royal Hospital, which is one of the European oldest psychiatric institution. So this collection of photographs is very interesting because it dates from the middle of the 19th century, and it was made just after the invention of photography. So if you look at the picture, these people are mental patients and criminals. So for the first time, photography has been used as a scientific tool. And it's very important to understand that photography at its beginning was not at all an artistic tool, but a scientific tool. So I start looking at this portrait day after day and at the information related to it. So if you look at the picture here, for example, you can see that it's written melancholia. So it's the illness of this patient. So it's what the doctor has considered she has. And I became more and more interested not only in the documents, in the historical documents, but also in the relationship I was building with them. So instead of trying to look at these pictures as objective historical documents, I start looking at them as people, as stories, and as physical objects. And I decided that all photographs and archives were not only dead documents, but living. So I'm going to show you an extract of my work. It's a video installation normally, so you wouldn't see it in this context, but I'm very happy to show you an extract. after the work I did at the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, I realized, I found this quote from Gaston Bachelard: "We are never real historians, but always near poets, and our emotion is perhaps nothing but an expression of poetry that was lost." And for me, it really symbolizes my vision of art and how I feel as an artist. And in a sense, I feel like I'm a poet archaeologist. So do you remember Howard Carter? Well, so in a sense, I became myself an archaeologist at the end. And recently, in 2014, my childhood dream came true, because I was selected for a residency at the 104 in Paris on the theme of archaeology. And during this period, I had the chance to work with real archaeologists. So I got invited by the University of Oxford as an artist in residence, and for 1 year, I spent time on excavation sites, discussing with archaeologists, reading their books, so I was really, really happy. So this period of research was a very specific experience, because in a sense, I discovered the reality behind the myths of the archaeologists, behind Indiana Jones. And I got more and more interested in the physical dimension of excavation. So I don't know if you've ever been to an excavation, but it's really, really impressive. You see people spending hours and hours digging the ground, collecting, archiving small stones, bones, pieces of potteries, and they have very, very precise gesture, and it's a repetitive process. So for my first piece at the 104, I decided to work with mimes and actors during a few months and to recreate the gesture of the archaeologist, but as if it was a choreography. So you've just seen the extract of this work, because it was just the extract I've just shown just before. And it's called Apparition. So here is an example of the pictures I've taken on the excavation site. It was at Dorchester, which is a very small town near Oxford. And I spent these days with the archaeologists, so I took a lot of pictures because I was really passionate about what they were doing. And I was supposed to do another film about the excavation itself. But to be honest, when I started taking pictures and shooting my film, I had very bad feelings. I could not film what I had planned, I could not concentrate, and I felt lost. So it was as if when I was looking at the archaeologist, I was lost in the time. And it's not about esotericism or anything, it was a real feeling. So instead of stopping my project, I decided to incorporate what was happening to me in the film and mixing it with what the archaeologists were doing. So the extract I'm going to show is from this film, which is called Data, History, Voyage.
And you've got, you know, your old original stone surface there.
Results after 5 iterations. Copper, intensity 372,013.
So as you have seen in this video, another event happened during this excavation. I lost half of my film, half of my video files. So it was a real painful experience. I'm sure most of you have already experienced data loss. So this event at the beginning was a big trauma, but at the end I realized it was very interesting in terms of my relationship with memory. So I started asking myself, how did I lose the most important part of my film? How could I recover it? What is my relationship to these files? What is my relationship to digital memory? What kind of memory is it? And finally, what will future generation excavate? Hard drives. It's a question. So finally, this event was a drama for me, a trauma for me, helped me really rethink my project and my relationship to memory, especially what is digital memory today. So I decided that the part of the film that I had lost should be a work in itself. And I decided to create a memorial for this lost data. So here is the memorial. It's called X-File. It's not a reference to the TV series, but maybe it has something to do with it. So it's made of metallic funerary urns, which you can see there are 350. And on the ground you have sand. And it really, for me, it's like a burial site or a memorial for this lost data. Here is the plan. So I realized also a map of the site, of the installation, to show where each file could be, was positioned in the installation. So, and the particularity of this installation is that it's infinite. So it grows with the, its scales can change and it grows with the place. So here it was at the 5 but if it was here in this space, it could be much bigger. Now, to come back to our project, you can see that there are a lot of links between my work, my artistic interest, and what we did all together. So first, thank you for your collaboration. So watching you during this week has been very enriching for me. And as I said at the beginning, the process for you and for me is as important as the objects and the text. So by searching for your objects, I'm sure, I hope, you have think about events, people, places in a different way, events from your past, from your personal stories. And I hope you have remembered. So in a sense, I can say that you have excavated your own past and your own story. So I'm going to show you a first montage of some objects from the first day. It's not the final work because it takes a lot of time to create an installation and really think about it, but you will some of you will recognize their objects. So I know these are objects from the first day. There are no objects from the second day. So as you can see, they are all very different, and there is a diversity which is very interesting. I know some of you have written that they don't have any objects or they don't believe in this relationship with materiality, which is totally fine. But I just wanted to say that these objects in themselves are important, but for me they are a door to get access to you. And that's why I think that this process was interesting. And I also really enjoyed the text, which I'm not going to find because there are so many, to show because there are so many. So I didn't want to choose one, but I will include them in the final work. And to be honest, the way you describe your objects were really, really different to each other. So again, it was very enriching for me. Some of you were describing with long sentences. Some of you were writing stories. Some of you were describing them with a lot of technical details. And I think I really enjoyed discussing with you about the object itself because we were discussing the colors, the light, the shape, how you keep it. So these details have their importance. And finally, by letting me taking a picture, and I have discussed this with some of you, I saw it as a way for you to reappropriate these objects and to reappropriate your story and who you are. So if you have any question about how it's going to end up, I can say that it will be an installation and it will be physically printed, but I cannot show you the final work today. So thank you again for your participation.